mostly talks given during the winter retreat of 1988 here at Amaravati. So this is continuing. We're about halfway through the talk, Only One Breath. And if you remember at the beginning, Luang Por Sumedho was emphasizing how the practice of anapanasati was only one breath. And as he said, began by saying, Venerable Subhato told me that he had never developed anapanasati, mindfulness of the breath. So I said, can you be mindful of one inhalation? And he said, oh yes. And of one exhalation? And he said, yes. And I said, got it. There's nothing more to it than that. So on that theme, we're now about halfway through. And this begins with just continuing along. I think the very last thing that we were talking about was how everything is teaching us, which is one of the main tenets of Luang Por Chah's life and teachings, that it's not just the individual special practices like mindfulness of breathing, but also all the other aspects and elements of our living situation and our field of experience, that if we're wise, everything will teach us. The ailments of the body, the qualities of concentration, the qualities of scatteredness and so on. If we're wise, everything will teach us. So, to begin. In each moment, it is as it is. With just one inhalation at this moment, it's this way. It's not like yesterday's inhalation. You're not thinking of yesterday's inhalation and exhalation while you inhale and exhale now. You're with it completely as it is. So, you establish that. The reflective ability is based on establishing your awareness in the way it is now, rather than having some idea of what you'd like to get and then trying to get it in the here and now. Trying to get yesterday's blissful feeling in the here and now means you're not aware of the way it is now. You're not with it. Even if you're doing anapanasati with the hope of getting the results that you had yesterday, that will make it impossible for that result to happen. One of the aspects of this is when we talk about establishing your awareness in the way it is now, because we tend to think so quickly, thought arises very, very fast. Often we consider awareness or knowing to be, in a way, a mental activity based around thought, so that the mind thinking the words, this is the way it is, or I'm aware of the breath. But one of the most essential aspects of the practice, and something that Luang Por Sumedho emphasizes again and again and again nowadays, is that awareness is not a thought. It's not a conceptual activity. Awareness is wordless. It's a quality of knowing that has no words. So we can tack onto it the words like, there is knowing, or this is the way it is, or that kind of mental framing or say labeling of the experience can be done and can help to clarify that quality. But awareness itself is totally wordless. It's not constructed. It's not formed. It's not based around a language or an identity. It's a quality like gravity. It's a natural aspect of the experiential world. It's the very core, the very heart of the experiential world. And so when we talk about being aware, it's not just having an idea about or labeling or naming, but it's that wordless knowing quality itself. That's the real essence of awareness. So to continue. Once Venerable Vipassy was meditating in the shrine room, and someone else was making quite distracting noises. Talking to him about it, I was quite impressed, because he said he first felt annoyed, but then decided the noises would be part of his practice. So he opened his mind to the meditation hall with everything in it, the noises, the silence, the whole thing. That's wisdom. If the noise is something you can stop, like a door banging in the wind, then stop it. Close the door. If it's something that you have control over, you can do that. But you have no control over much of life. You have no right to ask everything to be silent for my meditation. When there's reflection, instead of having a little mind that has to have total silence and special conditions, you have a big mind that can contain the whole of it. The noises, the disruptions, the silence, the bliss, the restlessness, the pain. The mind is all-embracing rather than specializing in a certain refinement of consciousness. Then you develop flexibility because you can concentrate your mind. This is where wisdom is needed for real development. It's through wisdom that we develop, not through willpower or controlling or manipulating environmental conditions, getting rid of the things that we don't want and trying to set ourselves up so that we can follow this desire to achieve and attain. So reading this passage about Venerable Vipassi, who was one of the monks in the community at Amaravati at that time, it reminded me of a very early retreat, one of the very first retreats that I ever did with Luang Por Sumedho in the beginning of life at Chithurst. I think it was probably something like January of 1980, during that winter time, maybe a little bit later in the year. But we were having a 2-week-long community retreat. And at that time, the house was a real wreck. So the only room that was really habitable was now what is the reception room. So what's now the shrine room in the house had a big hole in the floor that had been eaten away by dry rot. And so that and it needed fixing up. So that was done the following year, 1981, I believe. So we were all crowded into the reception room, and it was quite a crowd. That was the monks, the nuns, the anagarikas, lay people, everybody. About 25 people were in that room together. And so where I was sitting, there was an anagarika who was about as far away from me as this microphone is, and he had extremely loud breath. And when he was concentrating, when he was focused, then his breath became extremely noticeable. When he got distracted, then his breath would go quiet. But he was quite good at concentration. so for a long time during the meditation, I'd be getting annoyed with hearing him with this. Oops, don't want to sneeze all over the thing. Don't want to get too graphic and snotty, so excuse me for that. Anyway, you get the point. So he was breathing very, very loudly. So rather like Tan Vipassi, after a little while of this and realizing, well, actually his breath is much more noticeable than mine is, so why don't I just do anapanasati with his breath rather than mine? And so that's what I did, and then I was quite happy. It was much easier to concentrate because he made such a sort of continuous and steady noise. Except, as I said, when he occasionally got distracted, his breath would go quiet. But most of the time, it was quite pronounced and noticeable. So it was a sort of anapanasati by an external nose. There's no kind of a description of that in the Pali, but anyway, it's sort of mindfulness of somebody else's body. But it worked. It worked. Also, probably most of you are familiar with the story that so it was much used in Luang Por Chah's teachings of how, in his own practice as a young monk, when he was on a long tudong, traveling through the countryside and living in the forests in remote places in Thailand in his early years, one time he was sitting in the forest, and they were having a festival in the village, and a lot of the noise, the music playing from the village was rattling through the forest night, and he was sitting there under his glot, his mosquito net, and then these grumbling, irritated thoughts were going through his mind, like, don't they know there's a monk meditating? I come through the village every morning. I've been camped here for weeks, and they know I'm around, and don't they realize how much bad karma they're making through interrupting my meditation? That kind of grumble attitude that we can have. And then he had this very profound insight, which he drew upon many, many times over the years, which was, well, here I am sitting in the forest, and there's annoyance. The ear is the air vibrating. The air hits the eardrum and vibrates it, and so I hear noise. But the only annoyance, the only problem with that, is coming from my mind. The sound is just what it is. The air is just what it is. These are just aspects of nature. The only thing that calls it a problem is my mind. So it's not the sound annoying me, it's actually me annoying the sound. And that was a very, very helpful and profound insight, because we can often blame things, not just sounds, but other people in our lives. Illnesses, if only I didn't have this bad knee, if only I didn't have this headache, if only I didn't have this family strife, if only I was living in a different monastery, if only I became a nun or a monk, or if only I stopped being a nun or a monk, then, when I didn't have to deal with this particular set of perceptions, everything would be all right. And it's a simple insight based around something like external noise, like, say, hearing a machine or music or somebody breathing or whatever. Someone who decides they want to wear their nylon anorak in the temple. Luang Por Sumedho often gave extensive discourses involving nylon anoraks and nylon clothing and the effect that could have on the atmosphere. But everything relies upon attitude. And it's a simple insight, but it's extraordinarily penetrative. It really cuts right to the depth of the way the mind relates to the sensory world, to the experiential field. And so that if we see that everything hinges upon attitude, then even if you have a very difficult person living in close proximity to you, you have a lot of noise around, you have a chronic illness, you have difficult aches and pains, or physical obstructions, whatever it might be, if we remember that, it all hinges around the attitude, that's really where the difference can be made. As Luang Por said, if there's a banging door, you can get up and close it. If there's an illness that can be treated, then you can treat it. But if it's not treatable, if your dodgy knee is not fixable, then you realize, well, this knee is going to be bad for the duration. So can I learn how not to make a problem out of it? Can I learn to not create annoyance around it? That it's so that rather than say, the knee is my problem, or the neighbor is my problem, or my family is my problem, to see that it all hinges upon attitude. And that if the attitude can be skillful, and again, going back to that, everything is teaching us, if we can say, look at that and feel that, then even if there's a loud racket going on, like a lot of noise from the village, you can find perfect silence within yourself. The mind that knows a sickly body is not sick. And again, in another very well-known teaching, where the Buddha was talking to a very elderly disciple of his called Nakula Pitta, who was by reputation, I think, over 100 years old, and full of aches and pains and very decrepit in his body, the Buddha said very simply, it's better to be afflicted in body and not afflicted in mind than afflicted in mind and not afflicted in body. And then gave him the sort of extensive recitation of the Anattalakkhana Sutta, the teaching on not self. So it's a simple insight. And it's particularly challenging when we got a really good reason to complain. You're totally justified in being irritated by that noise or that person or that thing, that aspect of the world. That's when it gets most challenging. But essentially, if we bring the attention inwardly, we see that even things that it's reasonable to complain about, it's this mind that makes it into a problem. If it doesn't make it a problem, then it becomes an interesting challenge, or that's a puzzle, isn't it? How are we going to solve that one, or what's the best way of working with this thing that is exactly what I didn't want? So that's a very important insight and very worth bringing attention to. Any questions, thoughts, reflections? Yes, Evgenia.
Maybe in terms of what kind of qualities of mind can help to be less irritable, because it seems that if you cultivate in a right way, then yes, you can embrace many things. But if in daily activity you kind of stretched very much, very goal-oriented, then everything that goes on the way will be irritating. So,
Well, the short answer is more mindfulness and wisdom. Yeah, seriously. I mean, that's about it, really. Because the more that we get to know our reactive patterns, and then see, everyone's different, so the different things will be easier to get perspective on than others. So that maybe noise is not a problem for you, that things can be as loud as they like, or you could be hot, or you can be cold. No big thing. You can maintain a perspective on that, and you say, oh, I don't have to make a problem out of this. This is easy. But then if somebody criticizes you and says, Anagarika Avjenya, you are really useless. I'm just making that up. But then, wham, that can really hit you, and then you can be carrying that around for days. Oh, okay. That's something. So hot and cold, no problem. Lots of noise or silence, no problem. I can deal with that. Praise and criticism, okay, that's a sore point. So that's where I need to bring attention. So kind of what they call atanyuta, getting to know your own personality, getting to know your own character, the things that make the mind react, either with excitement and so, wow, that's really great, I want more of that, or how could they do that? That's so terrible, and that's so unbearable. Things that are painful or challenging, or things that are frightening. So getting to know your own character and seeing where those reactions are really, really fast and take a long time to fade away, then that's where we need to bring attention. So, and community life is very good for that, because we get a big range of different experiences, different things that we have to deal with in the course of a day. But when you see that there's a sore spot or an area where the mind gets really carried away, like, oh, food, yes, yeah, this is good. Or like, oh, criticism, that's terrible, I can't bear it. Then that sense of mindfulness and wisdom, knowing, okay, I have to bring attention to this, and then using that in the meditation. So if you see that the mind has heavily reacted to something, like you've been carried away with food, or got excited about that, or you're very worried about something, that you're very anxious, or you're feeling hurt, then in the meditation you deliberately bring that in, that particular incident, or just what somebody said, or what you just did, and bring that consciously in, and say, oh, look, this is a mental reaction. It feels this way. So you're using the practice to explore that reactive pattern. And the more you can look at it in sort of the coolness, quietness of meditation, you don't have to relate to it in a personal way. You can look at it as a mental event. You can replay it sort of slowly. You can revisit it. You can kind of explore it from different sides. It's then much more easy to get to know that pattern of reactivity. You might not it might not be apparent where it's coming from. You might think, why am I so afraid of that? Or why does that make me worried? Or why do I get so excited by that? And 9 times out of 10, we won't be able to see where it comes from. Usually it's like, oh, I don't know, but that's okay. As long as you see that, oh, that's the pattern that happens. So then you're developing that yoniso manasikara, that investigation, Dhamma Vijaya. You're kind of exploring it, getting to know it. So when it happens in a live situation and you think, oh, it's that worried feeling again. Now, what was it that caused that? Where's this coming from? Or what am I doing with this now? So then over time, and it takes a long time and multiple repetitions, infinite patience, as usual, then you slowly but surely, you get to know that reactive pattern. So whether it's worry or excitement or fear or aversion or your anger, whatever it might be, that gets more known as an object and not sort of who and what you are. Okay? To continue. Desire is insidious. That means it sneaks in and makes itself at home without being able to be noticed. Desire is insidious. When we're aware that our intention is to attain some state, that's a desire, so we let it go. If we're sitting here with even a desire to attain the first jhana, we recognize that this desire will be the very thing that will prevent its fulfillment. So we let go of the desire, which doesn't mean not doing anapanasati, but changing our attitude to it. So what can we do now? Develop mindfulness of one inhalation. Most of us can do that. Most human beings have enough concentration to be concentrated from the beginning of an inhalation to the end of it. But if your concentration span is so weak that you can't even make it to the end, that's all right. At least you can get to the middle, maybe. That's better than if you give up totally or never tried at all, because at least you're composing the mind for 1 second, and that's the beginning. You learn to compose and collect the mind around one thing, like the breath, and sustain it for the length of one inhalation, or if not, then half an inhalation, or a quarter, or whatever. At least you have started, and you must try to develop a mind that's glad at just being able to do that much, rather than being critical because you haven't attained the first jhana or the fourth. Well, this here, what I feel this is really pointing to is, and I think, if I can remember correctly, during the one of the previous readings, we talked about the difference between chanda and tanha. So chanda is interest or enthusiasm. It's that, ability of the mind to be pointed in a particular direction. So when Luang Por says, we let go of the desire, the tanha, the craving, which doesn't mean not doing anapanasati, but changing our attitude to it. So chanda is to do with being interested to concentrate, being interested to focus the attention, being interested to follow the breath as a method of developing that concentration. So chanda is interest, but that interest can be free of any kind of obstructive quality. It can be very much completely in tune with Dhamma. So having the interest to do it, putting energy into doing it, and then developing the quality of wisdom that works with the concentrative process, that can all be done with a basis of chanda, with that sense of wholesome interest and enthusiasm. Tanha is where it's saying, I've got to get first jhana, or I've got to get concentrated, I've got to get rid of my chattering thoughts, I'm going to do this, I'm going to succeed. All of that, I've got to, I must, I have to get rid of, and so on. So chanda, it can be tied up with sense desire and unwholesome qualities, but it doesn't have to be. And so that changing the attitude in terms of meditation is, yes, you're interested to concentrate. Like you might be interested to go for a walk to Little Gadsden Church. You walk down St Margaret's Lane and cross the fields and get to Little Gadsden Church after a couple of miles. It doesn't have to be an obsession. You don't have to be driven towards it. You can just be out enjoying the walk on a beautiful spring afternoon, so that the body's still moving, the legs are still pacing along. There's a direction that's being given, but it's not a thing I have to accomplish. It's not I've got to get there as some kind of obsessive goal, but the energy is being applied, the direction's being followed, the interest is there, and the walk continues, and then you enjoy the walk and you get to Little Gadsden Church. So there's a whole different tone to action and effort that is based on chanda and Dhamma chanda, the kind of that interest that's in tune with Dhamma, and tanha. And tanha has always got some kind of obstructive, destructive quality to it. Tanha is always conducive to the development of self-view, and always produces dukkha. That's why the Buddha labeled tanha, craving, as the cause of dukkha. So in a way, a lot of our practice is to do with recognizing how to work with chanda rather than tanha. Or if tanha is there, I gotta, I should, I must, I want, that kind of self-centered obsessiveness, to get to know the tone of that, the feeling of that, and to let it go, and to learn how to act and to engage in the practice, like just following one breath at a time. You're interested in it, you're doing work, but it's work that's based on interest, on, say, attunement to Dhamma, and with an interest in peace and freedom, liberation, rather than an obsession of I've got to get this, I've got to get rid of that. So there's a very different tone. So along with getting to know your own personality as part of the practice, getting to know that the difference between tanha and chanda. Those of you who are familiar with English hedgerows, it's springtime now, so the nettles haven't quite come up yet. I see there's a few daffodils and things, but a little bit later on in the year, you get two kinds of nettles that grow in the English countryside. One is called the stinging nettle, and the other is called the dead nettle. So the stinging nettle, predictably, stings. So if you touch the leaves, then you get a sting from the contact of touching the plant. A dead nettle, the leaves are almost an identical shape. They also have little white flowers when the flowers are in season, and they don't sting. But they often are growing in the same hedgerows, in the same parts of the garden or the countryside. They're often, you see them side by side, but they're two completely different plants, even though they look very like each other. So one will sting you, one will not. So tanha and chanda are very like the stinging nettle and the dead nettle, so growing side by side and looking very like each other, but of a completely different nature. So just like with the dead nettle and the stinging nettle, you have to look closely and say, which one is that? Is it okay? Am I going to get stung if I walk through there, or is it safe? And so it just takes a lot of experience and scrutiny, careful attention, that yoniso manasikara, to recognize the difference between those two. So to continue. If meditation becomes another thing you have to do, and you feel guilty if you don't live up to your resolutions, you start pushing yourself without an awareness of what you're doing. Then life becomes quite dreary and depressing. But if you're putting a skillful kind of attention into your daily life, you'll find much of daily life pleasant. That may not be so if you're caught up in your compulsions and obsessions. Acting with compulsiveness becomes a burden, a grind, and we drag ourselves around doing what we have to do in a heedless and negative way. However, we have this time for a retreat. We can sit and walk. We don't have a lot to do. The morning and evening chanting can be extremely pleasant for us when we're open to them. People are offering the food. The meal is quite a lovely thing. People are eating mindfully and quietly. When we're doing things out of habit and compulsion, they become a drag. A lot of things which are quite pleasant in themselves are no longer pleasant. We can't enjoy them when we're coming from compulsiveness, heedlessness, and ambition. Those are the kind of driving forces that destroy the joy and the wonder of our lives. Again, this is following up these different kinds of attitude that we can have. Sometimes, and this is a very strong conditioning that we have in the West and around the world, but very strong in the meditation community, is a sense of you've taken up a practice and then you've got to do it. I've decided, or my teacher told me, and so there's a kind of way that our sincerity or our interest can be co-opted by self-view, by that bhavatanha, the desire to become, vibhavatanha, the desire to get rid of. And out of a sense of faithfulness or sincerity, we feel, I've got to do the practice. I've decided to practice in this way. I've got to get rid of my defilements. I've got to be a good monk. I've got to be a good nun. I've got to be a good practitioner. Yeah, and so rather than the forms of monastic training and disciplines like mindfulness and breathing becoming something that is there to serve the practice, it becomes this thing that we are a servant of. You know, that we become a servant or a slave to this obligation. I've decided to do this, so I've got to do it. It's a duty. It's an obligation. Something that we're somehow forcing ourselves to do. And again, it can be. I'm not insulting that, but or looking down on it, because it can often be very firmly based on a noble aspiration to say fulfill the faith that you have in the Triple Gem and the Buddha's teachings. You want to do things really well. You want to be a good student. You want to follow the advice of the teacher. You want to be a good practitioner. All those things are very worthy and worthwhile. But when they get the insidious sort of influence of self-view and conceit, then it gets taken over. So I've got to do this. I must. I should. What will the teacher think of me? They'll criticize me if I'm a bad meditator. I'll get scolded if I'm a bad monk. I'll get kicked out if I'm a bad anagarika. I'm a terrible meditator. I have to apologize for what my mind is doing to the atmosphere in the temple. Yeah. And so that we can easily. I'm not reading anybody's mind, by the way, just in case you're wondering. It's just, but these are the ways that we can think. We are losing track of the fact that the forms of the monastic life and the commitment to the practice, the forms of living by the 8 precepts and being a noble upasika or upasaka, they are co-opted and get lost, and that these forms are intended to serve and support the practice, but we flip them around. The self-view and conceit has a way of turning it around, so it becomes this thing, this institution, or this practice that we have put ourselves into a subservient position to. We're there for it rather than it being there for us, is another way of putting it. So that I feel it's what Luang Por's saying here is really, really significant in that respect, is that you're remembering that anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, it's a skillful means that's being adopted to help fulfill the mind's potential to be focused in the present moment, to be paying attention to reality. It's not an obligation. It's not like a job that you're forced to go to and that you're not getting paid for. You're kind of obligated to do this mindfulness of breathing thing. And so, as Luang Por says, if your attitude is unskillful, then it becomes something that you have to do. You have that sense of obligation, or you're doing it grudgingly. Oh no, not another meditation session. Oh no, got to go to the temple again. There. Oh no, the cushion. Yeah, and it's some kind of horrible indentured labor, as they say, kind of a forced service that we have to do. Then look at your attitude, turn the attention around and look, say, where's this coming from? And to recognize this is all to serve the practice, is all to basically to liberate this heart. It's there for me, I'm not there for it. Which doesn't mean to encourage sort of rebelliousness or disrespect or casualness, but rather seeing how we can use skillful means in the most supportive and helpful way. And as Luang Por says here, if you are putting a skillful kind of attention into your daily life, you'll find much of daily life pleasant. So it's springtime in southern England. It's beautiful, flowers in the garden. You have the winter irises, the daffodils, primulas, a little snowdrops are around. The birds are singing, building their nests. Spring in England, how beautiful. But you might think, what's he talking about? This life is misery, it's so painful, it's so awful. Doesn't he realize the challenges I face? But I'm not belittling that or insulting that or making fun of that, but noticing if there's a skillful attitude, then the colors and the activity, the rising greens of the spring can be really delightful, pleasing, and enjoyable if the mind is say, taken up with unskillful attitudes and a sense of obsessive, self-based habits. Then notice that wow, this is it's amazing. I didn't even notice it was spring till he mentioned it. Yeah. So wrapped up in me and my problems, and me and my wrongness, or me and my shortcomings, and so on. So that it's noticing what the mind is doing with the moment, and seeing that the attitude that is here is not fixed. It can be worked with. It's not an absolute, an unchanging, immutable quality. That's why we practice, is that these attitudes can change, and that if we are noticing, like, wow, look at that, my mind is so filled with I've got to, I should, I must, and I mustn't, I shouldn't, I can't, that I can't even enjoy the dawn chorus. I can't enjoy the shape of a primrose. Look at that, isn't that interesting? So being interested in it, turning it into an interesting puzzle rather than a problem that I've got to get rid of, so that that turning the attention around, seeing what attitude is being brought, and then consciously working with the attitude. And going back to one of the previous passages, where Luang Por said, because you, let's see, the mind is all-embracing rather than specializing in a certain refinement of consciousness. Then you develop flexibility because you can concentrate your mind. This is where wisdom is needed for real development. It's through wisdom that we develop, not through willpower or controlling or manipulating environmental conditions. So there's a very famous talk of Luang Por Sumedho called Wisdom Develops Samadhi. I think it was probably the very first of his Dhamma talks that was translated into English, I think, back in 1963, way back. And in that talk, it's one of the sort of most highly respected and helpful Dhamma teachings out of the forest tradition, I would say. And actually, the Christian monk Thomas Merton referred to it as a spiritual masterpiece. And in that talk, Luang Por Sumedho is describing how it's exactly the wisdom faculty, that quality of wise reflection, that helps to guide and steer the mind in the process of developing concentration. It's that kind of, say that you might call being observant, noticing what the mind is doing, and being aware of too tight, too loose, too grasping too tight, pushing away, the reactivity of the mind, what it likes, what it dislikes, noticing that and reflecting on that, using the wisdom faculty to be fully aware of the ways the mind is drifting off to sleep, or getting too tight, or when it's really on track, and consciously using the wisdom and discernment faculty to guide and to say refine, to sharpen the process of concentration. So there are copies in the library. I'm sure you can find it. Wisdom Develops Samadhi. I think it was Venerable Panyawado, his elder English disciple. His portrait is on the wall over there. It was I think it was Venerable Panyawado who did that translation way back when. But it's exactly that wisdom quality, the wise reflection that we bring to the sense of attitude, so that you notice, the meditation is becoming a real grind. It's becoming a real burden. My mind is grudging it. I feel like I'm being, the Ajahn is forcing me to meditate, so that then those feelings arise in all of us from time to time, maybe a lot of the time. But rather than just believing in them, buying into them, bringing attention to them and being ready to work with them, that's what is very much a part of the transformative process. And the more that we use and cultivate that quality of wise reflection, and investigation, then we are able to help those attitudes to change. And so that then you find that you can really, it's much easier to enjoy your life here. You're not just totally wrapped up in trying to make your mind be this way or that way, or just completely obsessed with your arguments with the monk next door, or what or that ache in the right-hand side of your back really means, and whether it's going to lead to more medical problems, and the way the mind can pick up particular objects and get obsessive about them, loving, hating, worrying, so on and so forth. We can notice that, see what the mind is doing, and then challenge that to help the attitude to change. Any thoughts, questions, reflections? I'm unleashing a blizzard of words here, but don't be intimidated. No? Okay. Sustaining your attention on the breathing really develops awareness. But when you get lost in thought or restlessness, that's all right too. Don't drive yourself. Don't be a slave driver or beat yourself with a whip. Drive yourself in a nasty way. Lead, guide, and train yourself, leading onwards. Guide yourself rather than driving and forcing yourself. Nibbana is a subtle realization of non-grasping. You can't drive yourself to Nibbana. That's the sure way of never realizing it. It's here and now. So, if you're driving yourself to Nibbana, you're always going far away from it, driving right over it. So that's worthy of consideration. I'll read that again. You can't drive yourself to Nibbana. That's the sure way of never realizing it. It's here and now. So if you're driving yourself to Nibbana, you're always going far away from it, driving right over it. So the very mind that says, I gotta, I must, I should, is exactly the mind state that is say, an obstacle to realizing that here and now, the paccuppanna, the ever-present quality of the Dhamma, and the realization of the Dhamma, which brings the peace of Nibbana. So it doesn't mean that there's no work to do, but the work that needs to be done, the effort that needs to be made, is the effort to awaken. And that effort, the work that's being done, that we use practices like anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing, as a skillful means to support. Work is being done, but if that work is based on right effort, on chanda, then that process of awakening, of being aware, and so realizing Dhamma, that brings that result of self-realization, of realizing the Dhamma here and now. That work is actualized, but it's work that's enjoyable. It's peaceful. It's not tangled or made tense by the presence of conceit and self-view. It's work that's being done entirely free of any kind of selfing. One of the things that Luang Por says here that I feel is helpful, when you get lost in thought or restlessness, that's all right too. So to expand on that a little, I think will be helpful. So just sitting here in a temple or wherever you are meditating, in your room, your kuti, or in the other places where we gather, just letting the mind wander in papancha, saying, oh, Ajahn Sumedho said getting lost in thought is fine. Yeah, that's a practice too. That's also known as wasting your time, because what he means here is that if during the process of aiming to be awake and aware and focusing the attention in the present, or using the breath to support that, if the mind happens to get distracted and lost, don't beat yourself up about it, rather than just getting irritated and oh, I got lost, I'm so awful, I've got to concentrate, and turning the presence of thinking into an enemy or a kind of brain disease or an intruder, but rather recognizing, wow, I was totally gone for about 20 minutes there. My goodness, that was a long trip. Okay, I got lost, so let go, begin again. So you recognize, yeah, there was distraction. The mind was literally, the word distraction comes from the Latin meaning tracto, which means pulled apart. So pulled in different directions. So that that has happened. That distraction has happened. Okay, now the mind is aware. Oh, that was distraction, and then if it's not too intense, then that recognition is enough to bring it to an end. You say, okay, start again. Bring the attention back to the body. Refocus on the breathing, and one breath in, one breath out, and so. Rather than dwelling in self-hatred or how much of a failed meditator you are, or you wishing you were like somebody else who is always so poised and alert and obviously undistracted like you, just say, okay, that was 20 minutes off in another world, all right, okay, begin again. So that's one part of it. Another aspect is sometimes, and this can come after a time of being really, really focused or really, really peaceful, sometimes the kind of desire body, if you like, or the energy body, the sort of energetic habits influenced by body and mind, they just burst. Especially springtime can be particularly effective for this, just the energy, the surging green, fertile energy of springtime, kaboom, just the whole thing gets sort of overcharged, and the mind just blasts away, and no amount of, oh, I'm supposed to be staying with the breath, aren't I? And you can't even get to the end of that thought before it's raged off and burst into a different fantasy or plan or memory or something. So sometimes it's like that, and in that respect, again, it's rather like, I used to ride horses when I was a kid, and sometimes I don't know if all of you, probably English is not the first language of many of you, but that when you're riding a horse, there's a thing that the horse can do, which is called bolting. So you can ride a horse very fast, like say cantering or galloping, but it's still under your control. When a horse bolts, then it's galloping and it's completely out of the control of the rider. It's just going to go, and there's nothing that the rider can do about it. And I've been on horses when they have bolted, and it's kind of exciting, but also, exciting, terrifying, because if you fall off at that speed, then you can really break several things. But sometimes the mind is just like that. It just bolts, and all you can do is just try and stay on top and not fall off and break anything. And that's what it's like. So when the mind is like that, then it's good to remember, say in the Satipatthana Sutta, when the Buddha talks about cittanupassana, he says, knowing the concentrated mind is concentrated and the unconcentrated mind is unconcentrated. Knowing the unscattered mind is scattered, the scattered mind is scattered and the unscattered mind is unscattered, these kind of things. So when the mind is really out of control like that and just blasting away, then to know, here we go, the mind is really raging. And the mind that which knows the raging isn't raging. So like the rider on top of the bolting horse knows we're bolting, but it's the horse that's bolting. The rider is sitting still on the saddle, is just holding on. In a similar way, the mind can be fully aware of the thoughts being completely out of control, or mental images. Sometimes it's not verbal thinking; it can just be visionary images or mental images, just pictures and sounds, and memories just blasting away, and there's nothing that will slow them down or stop them. But the mind, which is knowing that succession of images or those words or those thoughts, it's not intrinsically tied to them. So just in that very simple teaching, in the Satipatthana Sutta, knowing the unconcentrated mind is unconcentrated. It's knowing in this moment the mind is not concentrated. This is radical scatteredness, and it's interesting that there's a peacefulness in that. That even as it's blasting away, the mind. It's like if you were in a situation watching a film, like a really active kind of action adventure film, or a kind of a sort of a Marvel Comics drama or something, where there's all kinds of things flying through the air and bright colors and big objects and loud noises. You can be watching the movie and just knowing this is a movie. It's a loud, bright, colorful, noisy movie. But it's that which knows the movie isn't tied to the movie. It can look away. It's not intrinsically part of it. It can know it. It can receive it, but is not entangled or identified with it. So that I feel that's also an extremely helpful principle to be bearing in mind. As he says, don't be a slave driver or beat yourself with a whip. Drive yourself in a nasty way. So again, that's one of the ways that we think, I try harder, I'm not doing enough. I'm sleeping more than 2 hours a night. This is disgusting, it's disgraceful. I've got to cut down, I ate 12 mouthfuls of food for today. That's awful. That's awful. I've got to reduce. I've got to cut that down. These kind of intentions. I'm not belittling them. That they can be noble in terms of reducing sleep or reducing our excessive intake, and the Dhutanga practices incline us towards learning to be comfortable without. But we can again make those sort of grim obligations that we feel that we have to fulfill, and make life completely miserable for ourselves, and make any kind of relaxation or enjoyment seem like a crime. Like I can't enjoy the daisies and the primroses. It's like no, practice. Oh, look at that flower. It's like, oh, little iris, so beautiful. No, stop it. Back to the breath. It's again, there's a noble intention that yes, we want to practice, but it's just a color, it's just a form, it's just a flower. The mind is drawn to the shape of a spring flower, the sense of the spring greenery. It's in the air, so we can notice it. Oh, look at that! The mind was distracted by that flower. I have no idea what it's called, but there's a feeling of beauty. Okay, carry on. Back to my kuti. And we don't have to make a problem out of it. So, last paragraph here. It's pretty heavy sometimes to burn up attachments in our mind. The holy life is a holocaust, a total burning, a burning up of self, of ignorance. A diamond is a symbol of the purity that comes from the holocaust, something that went through such fires that what was left was purity. And so that's why, in our life here, there has to be this willingness to burn away the self-views, the opinions, the desires, the restlessness, the greed, all of it, the whole of it, so that nothing but purity remains. Then, when there is purity, there is nobody, no thing. There's just that, suchness. And let go of that. More and more the path is just simply being here now, being with the way things are. There's nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to become, nothing to get rid of. Because of the Holocaust, there is no ignorance remaining, but only purity, clarity, and intelligence. So the word Holocaust here actually comes from the Greek holo, meaning all, and cost, C-A-U-S-T, meaning burning. So it literally means total burning. That's why Luang Por Sumedho is using it here. It's a total burning up of defilements, a burning up of self, really seeing the total transparency of self-view and conceit, that no, there isn't anything there. It might really feel like there's a me here, an I, and this independent entity, but that's a perception. It's an illusory form. It's some pattern of the experiential field that the mind is very, very heavily conditioned to believe in and to turn into something real. The I, me, mine, all of that. So when he says a total burning up of self, it's not talking about literally setting yourself on fire, but seeing through, using the light of wisdom to totally illuminate all feelings of I and me and mine, whether they are voiced in terms of the mind thinking, I am a monk, or I am a human being, or I am Ajahn Amaro, or even if it's unvoiced, just that feeling of that when the mind isn't thinking, me the experiencer, me the doer, me the walker, me the meditator, me the speaker, that doesn't have to be turned into words. It's just that attitude of I am the actor, the one who's doing, I'm the experiencer, the one who's feeling, or I the knower, that it's seeing completely through those. And as Luang Por uses this image here, in that total burning, like a diamond is a carbon, mostly from some trees and plants that's crushed under the weight and under pressure from the movements of the earth, and under heat and pressure, then what remains with that carbon in its most, pure or sort of reduced in size, crystallized form, you get a diamond. So it's a figurative way of speaking, but when the self-view and conceit is completely illuminated, completely seen through, and that transparency is utterly apparent, then what remains is the Dhamma, or say the triple gem, to use the imagery of the gem. So the triple gem is what remains. So when self-view disappears or is seen through, what remains is the triple gem: wisdom, truth, and virtue. And so that, again, as Luang Por puts it here, when there is purity, there is nobody, there is no thing. There's just that, suchness. And then let go of that. So any way that the mind forms a this here, experiencing a that there, that's all to be let go of or seen through, to be abandoned. There's just, as I like to put it, there's just Dhamma aware of its own nature. That's all. Also, as he says, there's nobody, there's no thing. One of the ways that the Buddha talks about Nibbana, and using the imagery of the island, he says, there is an island that you cannot go beyond. He says it is a place of no thingness. It is a place of non-possession. Akinchanang anadanang are the Pali words for that. Akinchanang and anadanang. It's a place of no thingness, no solid objects, and anadanang, non-possession. There's no subject to be an owner. There's no thing to be owned and no thing to own it. How could you own the Dhamma? How could you own the sky? How could you own the force of gravity? Or you can own the light of the sun. It's ridiculous. Owning doesn't apply. So that that realization of Dhamma, the felt sense of which is what we call Nibbana, then that's the result of that letting go. When that sense of self, nowhere to go, nothing to do, nothing to become, nothing to get rid of. It's like the Dhamma has nowhere to go, the Dhamma has nothing to do, the Dhamma has nothing to become, and the Dhamma has nothing to get rid of. And so that burning away, that total illumination of the patterns of our experience, this body, this mind, this personality, this physical place, this community, this weird and wonderful human condition that we are all a part of, and is, say, the fabric for this life. When that's seen through and it's understood clearly without delusion, then, as he says, what remains, when there's no ignorance remaining, there's only purity, clarity, and intelligence. Any last thoughts, questions, comments? Venerable, yeah, please. think so. I had a little, yeah. Yeah, it's working. Yeah, you're good.
Sometimes with the idea of completely letting go, it can bring up a lot of fear. And if there's nothing there, what is it that's afraid?
So could you say that last part again? If there's nothing there, what?
If there is no self, what produces the fear?
Well, I would say that, the Buddha never said there is no self, but the things that we tend to identify with, the body, the mind identifies with the body, or the personality, sensory experience. So the fear, as I've come to become acquainted with, it arises mostly from the habits of attachment being challenged. So that that the habits of I am the owner, this is my body, my mind, my personality, and so that the degree to which the mind is identified with things that it believes that it is or believes that it owns, then realization of non-possession, or that this isn't mine, or I can't keep this, then the ego-based or sort of self-based reaction is, oh no, this is a threat. So that it's I would say it's that it's an aspect of our conditioning, of the habits of feeling that we are this, or we own this, or this is who and what we are. Then that manifests as fear, and then what follows on from that is something to get away from the fear, either to distract ourselves with following a desire, or just going to sleep, shutting down, pushing it away. But it's like an echo of the conditioning of self-view. And my experience is that, these can be incredibly deeply rooted habits, but the more that the practice develops, and that's clearly seen through, and we kind of cultivate that insight into, well, this never really was mine in the first place, and who is there here? What is there here to do any owning, anyhow? And then the heart becomes more and more comfortable with that, and it's like, oh, how could I be losing that because it would never belong to me before at all? Oh, so then that's a slow and steady process, and it's I think one of the great benefits of Sangha life and the form that we have in a monastic community is that we have a social structure, and a supportive social structure, that really helps that kind of letting go, and that realization to be formed. But that's how I understand it. It's like an echo of the habits of attachment and identification. And for myself, say for example, I was very identified with being successful. I really liked being praised and succeeding. And so that when I was a kid, or when I was at school, and I would pass exams or win races or whatever, just so happy, so kind of wonderful, and so important, so proud. But if I failed at something, or I got a bad mark, or I lost a race, or the team got beaten, there was this kind of crushing experience, and seeing that and as I came into monastic life, I could see those same kind of habits of wanting to succeed, at being a really good monk, and being praised for getting things right and doing things well. And if I did things badly or got things wrong, then there was that same and that that kind of habit of seeing that was really based thoroughly upon self-view. And that maybe it's not exactly the same as what you're asking about, but I could see that when that self-sense is not affirmed, then I feel it's something terrible and awful. But if I reflect on that and see, oh well, what is a good monk anyway, or what's so wonderful about being the best at this, or being able to chant the Patimokkha without more than 3 mistakes or something, like, who really cares? Or if you're getting conceited about some kind of monastic performance, you're a real idiot. And so, and then reflecting in that way, and then just seeing the relief that came from letting go of that conceited or self-centered view, then that was like, oh, look, when you let go of that self-centered perspective, then there's a relief there as well. So, we're all different, but I would say that using the practice in whatever way you can to bring the attention to notice how when that sense of I and me and mine is challenged, either when it's thwarted or when it's seen as being void or unimportant, then say, oh, look at that, rather than, oh no, not that, and then following a way of distraction or switching off or whatever, say, to turn the attention to that and say, oh, look at that, that's really interesting. And so to cultivate that kind of curiosity, like, wow, that was a strong reaction. I really didn't like that. That's really got me on the wobbles. Then that sense of being interested rather than intimidated or just wanting to get away, wanting to sort of push it away and switch it off. I say that's the most helpful way of working with it. Okay, I think that's enough for today.